with, of course you start with this in every class, is sort of a brief history. We're going to talk a little bit about hardware, but this is a software class. So most of the discussion will be talking about software, and specifically we're going to dive into the software development life cycle. And we're going to talk about what phase of the software development life cycle that we're going to be working in. Okay, so one thing that I want to impart upon everybody is that computers are still a relatively new phenomenon, and that this science, compared to biology and physics, is still pretty new. If you look at the time frame here, really computers started in the 1950s, which, although that seems like a long time ago to you, this is still, compared to physics, chemistry, which have been around for thousands of years, this is still relatively new, and things are still in progress, okay? Computers have advanced very rapidly. Most of you all are familiar with these changes. So in the 1950s, the very first computers had vacuum tubes. What do you know about a vacuum tube? What's that? I'm sorry? They were very large. They were very hot. A vacuum tube, which was about the size of a large fluorescent light bulb, took up a lot of space, and it was represented a bit. So the very first computers were very large, very hot, and very slow. Okay? So that was not practical for many applications. So most of the first owners of computers were the Army and the government. Okay? So some of the two most well-known computers for the very beginning was one called the ENIAC computer in 1946 and one called the UNIVAC computer in 1951. With the invention of the transistor, okay, now I've got to see what is actually, with the invention of the transistor, this brought down the size, the heat, and made computers less expensive. So in the 50s, in the 50s and 60s, we saw a change for the better with computers, and as they became smaller and more affordable, then the use of them became more widespread. Does that make sense? Okay. So with integrated circuits, this phenomenon increased even more. So by the 1970s was the creation of something called the personal computer. Why is a personal computer called a personal computer? Why is a personal computer called? Go ahead. Anybody? Why is a personal computer? Yeah. Because you can take it with you. Okay, so it's for personal use. And these are all correct answers, but the main difference between a personal computer versus the large computers prior to that time is that they were single user. So the computers prior to the personal computer had many users, multiple users, called a multi-user computer, that shared the resources. A personal computer, and yes, it's all the things you all are saying is true, it's for personal use, but the biggest difference was that it was intended for a single user. So the operating system did not need to share resources and that type of thing. Does that make sense? Okay? So the microprocessor led to what we call the microcomputer, and we call it a personal computer, but that was really sort of a fallout. The idea is, what was the big difference is this was a single user computer. Okay? Now we have two main types of personal computers which still pretty much exist today, which is the Apple type computer and the IBM or IBM compatible. We kind of call that a PC. So we still have these two families of computers. So this has been some of the history of what has happened in computers. Now what happened with the advent of the personal computer, we still needed a way to share resources. And this happened via what? What was our method? Yes, the Internet. So the Internet allowed communication between personal computers, and we then gravitated towards a world where many people used these single computers and shared them via the Internet. So the other big advantage of the single or the personal computer is what? What was the big difference of the advent of the personal computer? What was the big difference that happened here? I've got to get this camera right. So if I I don't know if I want to be taped or not. What's the big difference with the personal computer? What did that mean for who was using computers? Every household not only had a personal computer. Here for Computer Science 175? There's a seat back there, over there, yeah. Where was I? Every household had a computer, and maybe not just one, but multiple computers. So as programmers, this means that we had to think very carefully about who was using them, which essentially the answer was everybody, okay? So they became ubiquitous, and the use of computers had to change drastically. They were no longer intended just for scientists, but for everybody. Okay, so there's actually a cool video. I'm not going to show it. The quality in the rooms for the videos are not the best. If we have time later, we can try it. But there's a cool video on some of the interesting things that happen.